Namaste and welcome to Youth TV Show. My name is Achal Purve and today we have with us Mr. Jonathan RECKFORD, Chief Executive Officer of Habitat for Humanity International. Habitat for Humanity is an international non-profit organization that aims at providing support to build sustainable and decent homes to the unprivileged people all over the world. Jonathan RECKFORD became the CEO of Habitat for Humanity International in 2005. He brings to his role as a CEO of this organization a passion to help those in need and business abilities required to lead a non-profit organization.
I feel very lucky to get to be part of Habitat, and part of the fun part of my role is there's a huge amount of variety in my job, but I spend a lot of time, probably too much time, traveling from my family's perspective, but I spend a lot of time visiting Habitat projects around the world, which is a combination to support local leadership, to do advocacy work, to do fundraising, and to create awareness for Habitat's mission. I spend another part of my time more administratively, really trying to grow Habitat's senior leadership team. So trying to recruit the best leaders and then support their leadership. And then I spend time with key volunteers and large donors and government leaders trying to affect housing policy. So those are probably the most important ways I spend time.
Would you like to share something about use of renewable materials to build decent and sustainable homes?
Yes, Habitat for Humanity believes that a decent home should as much as possible use local and renewable materials. One, because that's best for the families. It means we can lower the cost and make the houses as inexpensive as possible for our very low-income partner families. Second, obviously, it's good for the environment. Here in Nepal, we use bamboo very heavily, and it's a very low-cost, renewable resource, very durable, and building homes with bamboo and then reinforced with cement plaster creates a very solid, secure, but also low-cost home. And for us, the affordability is a critical issue, but we also want to contribute to a long-term healthy Nepal.
You recently had this project Everest built in Chitwan. What kind of impact has the project had on the families living there?
Just returned today from Chitwan, and it was very emotional yesterday at the end of the week. Because we had a chance to see where the families had been living, and most of these families had been living in shacks just made of scrap metal and cardboard and plastic. And for them to have a very simple home, but a home that is secure, safe, and solid, has a huge impact on both the physical well-being of a family. What we see is if a child has a decent home, she stays healthier. There's a huge health benefit. And if a child's healthy, then they have a chance to go to school and do well. If they can get an education, then they have a chance for a livelihood and the ability to sustain themselves. So we really see a house as a foundation for a better life. But in addition to the physical side, there's also really a psychological benefit that often there's a shame that comes with poor housing. There's a lack of dignity, and often it can start to change a person's outlook. Once they have a home, it actually can change their view of their identity, and we see then children starting to think about having a different kind of future. Instead of just trying to survive, they can aspire to a different kind of life, and so we hope it's really a launching pad for these families.
You have worked in the Wall Street for Walt Disney, and now you say that working as a CEO of Habitat for Humanity is the best fit for you. It's the best job that you are currently doing. So how do you say that it is the best job for you? How do you think it is the best fit?
You know, I grew up in a family that cared a lot about social justice, and my grandmother was really quite a famous politician, and she was one of the first women to be elected to Congress in the US, and she was very passionate about justice issues. And when I was young, she would always lecture us and ask us what we were going to do to be useful. And her idea is that all of us are supposed to be useful in life. And so I had that idea, and when I was coming out of school, my thinking was I would learn a lot about management faster in the business side, and then take those skills to the nonprofit sector. And so now I think it's possible to have a career in the nonprofit sector just as well. But at that point, I thought I could learn faster by working in large businesses and then acquire the skills. But I really wanted the sense of working on something that had more lasting value. And so for me, Habitat really brought together the heart and the head pieces in a way that I love getting to do something that has such a direct transformational impact on families.
Was there any special event that had your mind triggered that this was what you wanted to do?
You know, I had a very powerful experience, a couple of them, and Asia was a part of both of them actually. After I'd worked on Wall Street, I've decided I really didn't want to work on Wall Street, and so before going to business school, I was lucky enough to win a grant to spend a year in Korea, and I worked for the Olympic Organizing Committee back when Seoul hosted the Olympics. And that was a really powerful experience. I ended up doing marketing work, but also coaching the Korean rowing team and living with the Korean coaches and athletes. But that was a year, I had never really traveled heavily outside the US before that. And I spent also 3 months traveling all across Asia and saw, first time I'd really seen extreme poverty. And that had a big impact and made me think more about trying to do something around poverty alleviation. And then about 15 years later, when I thought now was the time to leave the for-profit sector and go into nonprofit work, I visited India and worked as a volunteer in Uttar Pradesh with the Bangi, who are among the Dalits. The Bangi are at the very bottom of the outcasts. And I really, from a personal faith perspective, was deeply upset by the way so many children were living, and I came back from that really convinced I wanted to focus on poverty issues for the rest of my life. And so it took a while. It didn't immediately land with Habitat, but that led to other volunteer roles that led into full-time work for my church, and then that led to the opportunity to come serve at Habitat.
Even though you have moved along a lot of career opportunities, you haven't had a time to stay idle throughout your career. So do you think it was destiny that supported you along with your sheer capabilities?
And for me, I do think so. It's interesting. I tend to look at things through my context of my faith, and sometimes I think you can see God's hand looking back more easily than you can at the time, because I loved all of the jobs I had, but there wasn't a particularly logical pattern why as they just kept coming along at different times. And now I can look back, and each role taught me really important things that have allowed me to be more effective as a leader in this role. So it's been interesting so I do think, I think it translates across all faiths, but I really believe in this idea of calling. I think all of us, every person, your most important job is to figure out your purpose. Why are you on earth, and what are you supposed to do? And my favorite theologian's definition of calling is that place where the deep gladness of your heart and the world's great need meet and come together. And so in a way, your job, not just in school, but in your early career as well, is to really look for that. What is that problem in your society that you want to be a part of solving that aligns with your own gifts and skills and passions? And if you can find that intersection, that's in a way, I think that's where your destiny ought to be. Sometimes that unfolds very slowly. For some people, that they find that much more quickly. I was a slow learner, but it's...
Referring to your belief in destiny, if there hadn't been a call about Habitat's search for a CEO, where do you think you would have been at this point of time?
I think I would have kept looking for something like Habitat.
Habitat for Humanity has been building houses for unprivileged part of the community for a long time. So on a personal level, could you please share with us what home is to you?
That's a great question. And I think, one of the reasons I think there's so much poverty housing in the world is that most of the people making decisions didn't grow up in poverty housing. And if you ever talk to somebody who grew up in a shack or grew up in terrible conditions, you don't have to explain anything. They understand at a deep, visceral level how important home is. It's in Arabic, actually, bait, the word for home, is much deeper than a physical structure. It's central to your identity as a person. It's where you come from. It's where your roots are. And I think home is more than four walls and a foundation and a roof. It's really that launching place and sense of self that can give a child the confidence to go out and explore the world and create a life for herself or himself. And so it's become, to me, very personal. And I think what we've got to do collectively, and part of a Habitat's mission, is to raise the awareness for people who don't understand how important home is because they take it for granted, and therefore to help create more empathy for those who don't have that opportunity. And to me, the idea that still in Nepal, which is such a beautiful and wonderful country, half of the Nepalese children are living in substandard or poverty housing, and I think we can do something about that. And if we have a wonderful team with Habitat Nepal and fantastic volunteers in this country, and the aspiration is to through all these community groups across the country to build 1 million houses over the next decade, and I think that's possible. And so it's not the resources exist; it's just the willpower. And where I get so excited about young people is they can help us create that willpower.
Habitat for Humanity has been building houses that's they have been shifted from their standard of life to a new one. So what after this? How to make this level of life sustainable for them? I mean, they have a house now, but what about other prerequisites of life that they have? I mean, it's a really excellent thing that Habitat for Humanity has been working on shelter, while there are other organizations who just focus on sanitation, food, and etc. And at the same time, this organization has been working for house. But what after this? How can this organization help these people who have been shifted to a different level of living sustain this or grow even better?
A complex issue for nonprofits because there's a temptation to try to do everything, but one of the challenges is I think each organization has different strengths, and so for us there are pieces we take on. So first, when we think about shelter, there are 5 elements of shelter, so all of which are absolutely critical. First, is it a physically durable house? Second, is it large enough for the family? Is there enough living space for each person? Third, is there water? Fourth, sanitation, because we wouldn't view it as a decent home if you don't have water and sanitation. And then fifth, do you have secure tenure? Do you have the right to stay in your house? And that's critical, because if you don't know that you can stay, why would you invest? So we certainly wouldn't say housing is the only thing a family needs. You're so right. We would argue it's almost a prerequisite. You need the house so that you can have those other things. But our general view is that Habitat is really focused and good at shelter, but not necessarily great at healthcare or education, or we do some in livelihoods. And one of the reasons we have families participate in the building process is so that by the end of the process they know how to take care of their house. But also for young people, it means they may have a skill in construction that they can then earn money by helping other people build houses afterwards. So we do a lot of job training as part of our work, and we try to make sure that there is an educational component so that by the time the families have finished completing their house, there's always some financial training and construction training as well, so that they can be successful in their house. I think, I joke sometimes, as soon as everyone in the world has a house, then we'll take on the next challenge. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be done in the next few years. But I think one of the ways it can be done is through partnership. And what we believe is that to have a healthy, self-sustaining community, you need to have education. We need good schools. We need healthcare. We need economic development. We need housing. But one organization probably can't do all those things. So we need the government. We need businesses. We need civil society, all working together to make sure that you've got a sustainable community. And so, but it's really important that in a way we don't think we're done once the house is there. One of the reasons we don't give away the houses is we actually think sometimes that actually gets in the way of the independence of a family. And when the family's earning and paying back their loan, that gives them a sense of confidence and pride and a better sense that they can achieve things. And then they often have more aspirations to take on additional things for their family. Sometimes they can also run a small business out of their house, so it can create an opportunity for earning income as well. But it's a great challenge, and I think in a way the language we've used is we want to be a partner and a catalyst, but not necessarily ever pretend that we can solve all the problems. But if we can build the capacity of the community to solve their own problems, then the community can lift themselves up.
Habitat for Humanity International is now a well-known organization. How much do you think you've achieved until now?
Not enough, but we have a lot to be proud of. So what I often say is we have much to celebrate, but also more to build. We just announced a couple of weeks ago we finished our 1,000,000th house, which is a lot, but against the world, not nearly enough. And so we've also announced a very ambitious growth strategy. And actually what's happening in Nepal, I think, is a wonderful example of that, where they've gone from building a few hundred houses to a few thousand houses to tens of thousands of houses, and now aspiring to build hundreds of thousands of houses. And that's what we really want to see in each country. And it's one of the reasons we're really excited. Next year, our most famous volunteer, former President Jimmy Carter, is going to come back to Nepal. So I'm looking forward to being back next year. And we're going to use that event, like the Everest build, to raise awareness in Nepal and all across the region for the need for decent, affordable housing. So we're going to have a huge event a year from now, and we hope many of you will come out and participate.
How do you think, after your active life, active participation in this campaign, so how would you contribute to this sort of social service?
I think I don't have a plan at this point, which is unusual. It's actually a great blessing for me now that this is the first time there isn't anything else I want to do. I really want to keep until it's time to hand it off to someone else. I really want to keep doing this as long as I can. But I think in some ways the next evolution for me also is I'm doing more work partnering with other organizations and trying to do more work to influence the broader policy environment. So we're working with the United Nations, we're working with the World Economic Forum and some of other multinational groups to try to affect policy as well as the individual policies in different countries. But I think right now I'm almost trying to live more in the present, or I'm thinking in 5-year terms. I'm not thinking a whole lot about 10 and 15 years out at this point, but I hope I get to do this for a long time.
As a dynamic global leader, how do you define leadership, and what are the methodologies and technologies that you use to train your volunteers and your employees?
Thank you. I believe in and aspire to the idea of servant leadership, and there's been a lot written about the idea of servant leadership, but it's I think in some ways the best definition of a leader is, if people don't have to, are they following? And so if you look to me at the great leaders, they're the ones that people want to follow, not because they're forced to, but because they want to, because of the characteristics of those leaders. And so I think we can look at some of the great servant leaders, and to me, whether it's Jesus Christ or Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi, there are many who, and the key definition to me of that is they're leading because of their passion about the mission they're trying to drive, not from a sense of self-gratification or building up themselves. And I think that's there was a research study done in the US by one of my business school professors named Jim Collins, and he did a whole set of research around companies that were more successful and less successful in the same industries. And one of the key differentiators that came out of the research was what he called a level 5 leader. And the level 5 leaders, which I think is a nice proxy to a servant leader, had what he called the paradoxical combination of deep ambition for the mission, but personal humility. And that it's all about the mission, not about the person. And I think that to me is the best definition of servant leader. And we try to build up and find leaders that have a deep passion for getting the work done, but not necessarily a passion for advancing themselves. And what happens is if you really lose yourself in trying to drive the mission, then in fact you'll grow as a leader and you'll get skills. I do think there are a lot of important skills to grow along the way. One of the things I think is crucial in our world today is the ability to lead across functions and geographies and culture. And so one of the things I would encourage all young people to do is experience as many ways as possible to cross barriers, to learn to work with people across different socioeconomic levels, across different ethnic groups, across different faiths. Because if you can lead cross-culturally, you can lead almost anything. And it is I think nonprofit leadership is actually harder than for-profit leadership. Because when I was in the business world, we had bonuses and stock options, and you had additional incentive tools that you don't have in the nonprofit space. But actually, one of the things I view is you should learn, lead your people that are paid as if they're volunteers, and you should lead your volunteers as if they're paid. So sometimes people don't lead volunteers well. They don't give them a job description and accountability and training and all the support. And we need to do a better job leading our volunteers that way. I think we should lead our staff more as if they're volunteers. We should love them and appreciate them and make sure that we're leading them through influence versus authority. And I think the best leaders learn how to lead through influence versus authority. So a great mark of leadership for a young person is, can you get people that you have no authority over to follow you? And if you can do that, you'll be very effective as a leader.
How do you think youth can contribute to the development of the nation and the world?
March 21st, every young person in Nepal should come out and participate in Habitat's Youth Build. That's a very simple, tangible thing. But if we get, instead of 1 million, let's have 5 million youth come out, everybody will pay attention to that. And it could have a big impact on the policy environment in Nepal. So that's a very tangible thing. But beyond Habitat, of course, I think all of you should spend all of your remaining days solving poverty housing. But some of you are probably called to do other things as well. But make sure you vote. Participate politically. That's really important. Speak up and connect people to causes, and use your networks to influence your networks towards good. Encourage people to spend their money with companies that are socially conscious and are making Nepal better. Think about, you can impact the environment, you can impact the educational system, you can mentor young, you can bring along the next generation and be mentors and guides and role models for younger people. So there are a lot of very specific ways you can make a big difference.
Do you think there has been a good balance between your professional and personal life?
That's a great question. You should ask my wife and children. It's one of the things I have to manage the most carefully. And so there's an idea in life that the things you measure get done. And so often it's very important to pick the right metrics. So one of the things in my goals every year is a very specific metric about protecting time for my family. So I actually do take my vacations, and I think that's really important. And I block out the times when my children are out of school so that we can be together. And I try to I spend a lot of time on airplanes, but I try to have a lot of short trips so that I'm not away too many nights. But that's probably the biggest challenge of this role. And every job has challenges. And one of the challenges is I love seeing the world, but I don't like being away from my family. And so trying to keep that in a reasonable balance.
How does the phrase that behind every successful man there is a woman, so how does that justify to you?
I think the question is, behind every successful woman there's a man also. So it goes both ways. But it's true that my wife gave up a very high-powered legal career because she wanted very personal choice, and I don't think that's the right choice for everybody, but for her, she wanted to stay home with our children. And she loves Habitat's mission, and so she's very supportive. I don't think she'd be supportive if I were doing this for something that was less worthwhile, but it is. But there's no question that's made it more possible because she shares a lot of our work together.
Thank you, Mr. RECKFORD, for being with us and sharing with us your valuable experiences. With this, we've come to the end of this show. We look forward to your feedback. You can contact us at 01-425-7250 or email us at leadershipacademyktm@gmail.com. We'll be back next week at the same time. Namaste.